Welcome back to the Ignore the Template podcast, the only FPL podcast on the entire internet, hosted by me. My name is Devin, and we're finally here. Gameweek 1 is mere days away, and I need to get a draft together. I do have a final draft. I will be reviewing that today, go through all of my thought processes, and we're actually also going to go through all of the drafts I've had. To be honest, I haven't tinkered as much as I have in past seasons, so I can go through all of my drafts, see who has come, who has gone in the drafts, see all the most present, ever-present figures in there, and walk through my thinking in the final draft of how I got there, basically. And before we get into all that great draft goodness, I've got some bullet points I kind of want to cover, just some things to keep in mind about the season, international break, wild card, bench boost, some just minor things like that, just to keep in mind. And it's on my mind, so maybe I should put it out there for everybody else. And let's jump into the drafts. I'll be using nextxi.app, not a site I've used before, but if I'm honest, I really liked the layout and it wasn't lagging like crazy. Oh my God, FPL.team, I really like the website, but holy cow, the ads and the lag and horrible. So nextxi.app, got some pretty pictures and doesn't lag. So this is the one I'll be going for. This was the very first draft I put together. As soon as the game launched, I kind of just threw my thoughts out onto a template for a lack of a better term. So let's walk through it. In goal, I had David Raya. In defense, I had Gabriel, Calafiori, O'Reilly, and Mitchell. In the midfield, I had Mbumo, Semenyo, Sarr, and Verts. In the forward line, I had Holland and Calvert-Lewin. And then on the bench, I had, I think, Alex Palmer, who's the third choice Ipswich goalkeeper, but that was always just going to be a dud 4.0 goalkeeper, with the assumption a playing goalkeeper would have arisen in the time in between then and Gameweek 1. That has not happened. Sessegnon was also on the bench. Slater, surprisingly, on the bench. And then a dud forward was on the bench as well. Kusi Asari from Fulham. That was always just a 4.5 forward, hoping that there would be a playing 4.5 million forward that was eligible to be in the team. So initial thoughts, not horrible. I think some new information has come out since then, but I think we're going to see a lot of similar players moving forward. And yeah, I generally like it. It basically covers a lot of the bases. We've got some of the best forwards in the game. We've got basically 3 of the best defenders in the game. Got a solid midfield. Verts, I'm probably not feeling as much anymore. In retrospect, I think I was that was probably the last player I dropped in. I knew I was going to be hot on Sarr, Semenyo, and Mbumo. And then the bench was basically just the cheapest bench you could possibly afford. Moving on to draft number 2, a lot of familiar faces. David Raya, Gabriel, Calafiori, O'Reilly. Moving into midfield, Mbumo, Sahar, Njai, Shada. In the forward line, Calvert-Lewin, Holland, João Pedro. On the bench, Alex Palmer again, Issa Diop, Tavernier, and Mitchell. So my thinking here was basically the same team, but I could actually afford João Pedro if I drop Semenyo, and I kind of like a lot of these £6 million midfielders, but basically the same defense. Midfield, dropped in price a little bit, but I think more well-rounded. And honestly, this is probably a better bench boost team than the previous draft. Obviously, Palmer would be an issue. Alex Palmer, the goalkeeper, would be an issue, but otherwise I would be happy to bench boost a team like this. And I know one of the rules that I kind of impose upon myself is not to think too far ahead, to be fluid in how plans work out. And we are going to see a very obvious example of that, news that came out this morning. But bench boost was in the back of my mind. I was hopeful that we would get a 4.0 goalkeeper that was playing. Didn't come about, but yeah, that would be a good bench boost team, I think. So let's take a look to see what the third draft looks like. So the third draft is relatively recent. I put out this draft right before, or basically as the Bruno G deal was going through from Newcastle to Arsenal. I think I had changed the model a little bit to that weighted model. So some of the players that popped on the weighted model didn't pop as well on, or as highly as the purely underlying data model. So just to run through the draft: David Raya again, Gabriel, Calafiori, Gvardiol this time, Dan Ballard, Mbumo, Bruno G. So we've got 4 Arsenal players off the bat, but I did lock in that transfer before it went through. I've since transferred him out, so it's completely meaningless now. Keenan Dewsbury Hall, Calvert-Lewin, Holland, João Pedro, and on the bench for Bruggen, because at this point I had accepted that we're not going to get a 4.0 million goalkeeper that's playing, Mitchell, Slater, and Anton Stack. And as we can see, the idea of a bench boost is fully in effect. I'd accepted that there were no 4.0 playing goalkeepers for Bruggen's in, all playing bench players. Kind of surprised Stack didn't come into my thinking earlier on. But going back to this idea that, yeah, I had transitioned over to a weighted model where we see more of the observed stats getting kind of factored in because they had played quite a few matches. Like most of these players had played a full season, so we can take a little bit more confidence in their observed stats over their underlying data, as opposed to the previous drafts, which were really indexed on the underlying data in particular. That's why we're seeing like an Anton Stack pop, Dewsbury Hall pop, Bruno G pop, Dan Ballard to some degree. I think he might have overperformed. I'm not sure, but yeah, certainly different. This is a pretty stark difference compared to the previous 2 drafts. Now, I've heard the comments, and I did some independent thinking myself, and especially watching the Community Shield, where Bruno G just, first of all, he didn't even play the full match. That would have definitely been a necessity for him to be in this Gameweek 1 team. But he just didn't play very well. I expected him to be, and longer term, I expect him to play with Declan Rice and have that freedom to go forward. Just didn't see that in the Community Shield. He was very reserved, played deeply. He didn't play horribly by any means, but just was not effective in the ways that score FPL points. So he's gone. Let's talk about the final draft that I'm currently on, and there are some decisions to make. Alrighty, going through the final draft, the one that I'm currently on at the moment, I've got David Raya, Gabriel, Calafiori, probably sick of hearing that, Gvardiol, O'Reilly, Mbumo, Stack, Sarr, Calvert-Lewin, Holland, João Pedro, and on the bench for Bruggen, Gross, Konsa, and Slater. So obviously at the time of recording, it is looking like Konsa is going to be moving to Arsenal, that we've gotten the here we go or whatever from David Ornstein. So it's incredibly likely. It's more likely to happen than less likely, I'd say. But that leaves me with the dilemma. I currently have 4 Arsenal players in my team, which means if I am to make a transfer, one of those players would have to leave. And I've done some Konsa math, and stick with me for a second. So I know it's obvious that Konsa is a very good pick if he plays for Arsenal and if he starts for them. So yes, understood, but can we quantify that a little bit? And I can, in a very simple, probably overly simplified way, but if we look at, and this is really pertaining to clean sheets because Konsa is not an attacking defender. He's not really a defensive contribution defender. He's good in real life, but he just doesn't pop for FPL. We see that he got 2.9 points per match, 100 points overall. he's kind of like a Luke Shaw in that way, or at least Luke Shaw of last season. Really a clean sheet guy and nothing really else. So Konsa got 100 points, 2.9 points per match. Aston Villa had about a quarter of their matches were clean sheets, a little less than that. I think 23.4 something percent. Arsenal, on the other hand, got 50% clean sheets last season. They had 19 clean sheets. There's 38 matches. So if we take that clean sheet percentage and we bring Konsa up to that, assuming that Arsenal get about the same amount of clean sheets or have about the same clean sheet percentage, what would that do to his point total and his average point total per match? Okay, and to help out here, we're going to go to the spreadsheet where we've got expected points per match, the projected points, the value added per million, which is like a measurement of how much you get per their price, defensive contribution points, defensive contribution hit rate, minutes played, matches played, price, position, team, all that good stuff to identify a good player. And a quick shout out, all of this is available on the Airtable for free. That description is in the link below. That link is in the description below. I've got it filtered by players that played greater than some amount of minutes. It looks like 600, 700 something. Because I see there's a player who played 800 minutes. So let's just say it's probably filtering out players that played more. It's filtering out players that played fewer than 800 minutes. And we are sorting by the expected points per match. Now, this isn't the exact points per match we saw last season. This is generated by the weighted model that I've calculated and have described to death on other podcasts, so I won't go over that. But let's go down to Konsa, because this is why I would not have thought he was a good pick prior to him potentially moving to Arsenal, almost certainly moving to Arsenal. If you look at his points per match, and this, I also have it filtered only for defenders who were 4.5 or 4 million. So we're just looking at the cheap guys. Konsa, by the weighted model, 3.07 points per match. So maybe the underlying data helping him out, giving a slight boost here. And 104 points overall. We know he actually scored 100. And we know his points per match was 2.9. So slightly different, but you get the picture. And I'll just shout out Shaw, who I love to heap crap on. 3.13 points per match, 118 points. Now, if Konsa had the clean sheet percentage of an Arsenal team that we're projecting him to move to, that would boost him up all the way from 100 points or 104 points to about 135 to 140 points. And that would give him a full extra point per match. So instead of 2.9, he'd be kind of around 4 points per match. Now, as you could see, that tops him out in terms of points per match. The only player that's like relatively similar to him in that regard is Sessegnon. And Sessegnon played sometimes as like a left winger. Is he going to be able to do that reliably? I don't really know. Tete, he's up there as well, but limited matches and minutes, so take that for what you will. But all of this to say that if he is to play consistently for Arsenal, if we are to assume that he's going to rock into Arsenal, take that right center back spot until Saliba comes back, he's the best 4.5 million defender in the game, the best 4.5 million player in the game by extension. And I know that was pretty obvious to probably everybody who just realized that now a 4.5 million player is playing at Arsenal, but I think it helps to give a little bit more context. So I've been a big fan of Mitchell. I've been a big fan of Justin and Aina because they pop pretty highly on this points per match. And at the end of the day, that's what you need, points per match. And especially if you're looking at guys that are 4.5 million and below. Some of these other guys, I think, have more question marks around them, whereas Mitchell, Justin, and Aina, hopefully Aina, have fewer question marks, maybe a little bit more solid in the minutes, and For Aina, I think there's maybe more upside with him being a wing back instead of how they played last season, which was very poorly, and they played a back four system. But if we can make the assumption that Konsa is going to be playing regularly for Arsenal, then he's the best 4.5 million player in the game. And before I go back to the draft, I do want to, because I feel like I've definitely hyped it up a lot. It's not by that great of a margin. Like if we look at Mitchell, 3.67, and Justin, 3.65, Aina, 3.61 points per match, or weighted points per match, essentially what we might expect next season. So it's not like drastically earth-shatteringly different, but he is clearly the best 4.5 million player in the game. And we're back to the draft and the dilemma that I find myself in. So here's my thinking, and I just want to kind of throw it out there. I still want to bench boost game week 1. Now, if I bench boost game week 1, I either take the 0 points from Konsa, because I don't think it's realistic he plays. However, I will say that Arsenal are the first match. They play on Friday against Coventry at home. So if we get any news that Konsa is in the team, he's set to start, 100% I'm keeping this draft. I'll hit the bench boost. I'll have 4 Arsenal defenders, and I'll just pray that Coventry don't score. If, on the other hand, it's unclear or it's confirmed that he's not going to be in the starting 11 or not even going to be in the squad potentially, then I can go one of 2 paths. I could either stick with Konsa and I guess 3 paths technically. Stick with Konsa, take the 0 points from him, hope that he comes off the bench maybe or something like that. That's not very good for a bench boost. You don't want to go into the bench boost knowing that a player is not going to play, because in all likelihood, there's several players that may not end up playing. We don't know 100%, especially some of these guys like Slater. Gross is playing a match. I think he played today, actually. I should check on that. A European fixture. So these players will all probably start, but we don't know 100%. And I know that because last season I got burned, I think, by both of my bench boosts. I had like multiple players pick up injuries right after the deadline, or the coach just like felt like he didn't want to explain that there might have been an injury to a player and they couldn't play. So it can happen. It definitely can happen game week 1. I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but I don't really want to go into it knowing that a player is not going to play. So that's option 1 of 3. So if I know that he's not going to play, just take the tiny L, hit the bench boost anyway, and, just take it as it is. Option 2 would be swap him out for Mitchell. I think they've got a good fixture against Everton. It is away, but defensively, I think that's a pretty fine fixture for a bench boost. Option 3, if we know that Konsa's not going to play, I hold on to the bench boost and hope that Konsa quickly gets into the team game week 2, game week 3, game week 4, play the bench boost, then wild card, hopefully into a different team. The problem with that third strategy is I'm going to have to feel very confident that I'm not going to make any transfers, because if I go down that route, I'm basically locked into that. I'm not going to want to transfer. Like, the whole reason I would have had Konsa in would be to get the quadruple up of Arsenal defenders. And if I have those 4 players, obviously due to the rules, these silly rules, you can only have 3 Arsenal players, or 3 of any team for that matter. So I'd have to transfer one of those guys out. I'm feeling good about Gabriel. I'm feeling good about Calafiori. I'm feeling good about Raya. I probably would just transfer Konsa to Mitchell or Aina. So yeah, I would really have to feel confident that I would just stick with this team, roll with it, hope to God that there's no injuries or suspensions, and then play the bench boost, kind of later on when Konsa's settled in the team. So obviously I know the preferred thing would be if we found out that he was definitely going to play. So that's in the cards. That's in the cards until game week 1. Like I said, Arsenal are the first match, so hopefully we get some leaks. Is that a terrible thing to say? But if I do get some information that Konsa is going to start, I'm not going to make any transfers. I'm just going to roll with this team, hit the bench boost, call it a day, forget about it, and then move on into Game Week 2 planning. But if that other thing happens and we find out Konsa's not going to play, or if it's uncertain, I'm really not sure which of those three paths I'm going to go down. If I'm being honest, I'm probably, gun to my head, I'm probably swapping Konsa out for Mitchell and just going with like the original plan before Konsa was potentially going to Arsenal. So for the sake of that argument, let's, because I think that's probably the most likely if I'm completely honest. So let's put Mitchell in, and this is what the team would look like Game Week 1 under those set of assumptions. So for this, I would play the bench boost. Look at that. Nice little ring around all the bench players. I would feel very good about that bench boost. It's one of the reasons why I think the bench boost Game Week 1 is very appealing, at least for my team. I know people have their sights set on Game Week 2, Game Week 3. This is like the ideal situation for me. I like the bench, and on top of that, I can get it out of the way immediately. I don't have to worry about if any of these players pick up a suspension in Game Week 1, an injury in Game Week 1. I have some information, but not all information. I like this a lot better. And Gross Verbruggen playing Aston Villa at home, decent. Mitchell playing Everton away, decent. Slater against Manchester United, not decent, but he's a midfielder. So at least the fact that he's not a defender, I don't have to worry about goals conceded. I'm thinking he's either going to get 1, 2, or 4 points, essentially. Maybe 3 if he gets the defensive contributions and a yellow. Not expecting anything more than that, but that's why I just really want the bench boost out of the way. It's more of a headache. You have to take money. Well, you don't have to, but you generally take money out of your starting 11, put it on the bench. This way, I could just end it right here and then transition into a team that I think is slightly different from this, but has a little bit more money in the starting 11. But before we get into that, let's talk about some of those bullet points I nearly forgot. And I also want to talk about the players that haven't left really any of my drafts. So if we go through all 4 of the drafts, there were quite a few players who made it into all of them. So David Raya set in all of them, Gabriel, Calafiori, Mitchell. So 3 of the 5 defenders have basically stayed exactly the same. In the midfield, only Brian Mbeumo made it across all 4 drafts. And for the forward line, Holland and Calvert-Lewin. And then that next tier down, players that made it into 3 of the drafts, Nico O'Reilly, Slater, Ismail Assar, and João Pedro. And arguably, Ismail Assar probably could have been in this one instead of Dewsbury Hall, but I don't know. I was feeling Dewsbury Hall at the moment. So yeah, I think Sarr is a great pick. And I think he's pretty interchangeable with Dewsbury Hall, but I think I'm leaning ever so slightly Ismail Assar. And then those things to keep in mind. So we've got international break, a big international break in between games 5 and game 6. It's 3 weeks. This is the first time that they've done an international break like this. It's expanded so they don't have 2 very short back-to-back. They're just lumping it all into one international break. So after game week 5, it's going to be 3 weeks until we see club football again. And then further down the line between game week 10 and game week 11, there's more of a standard, smaller international break as well. Don't really need to start thinking that far ahead. Just wanted to put it on everybody's radar. So I think the next thing I want to do before we start doing some like tinkering and planning for the future, because I think one thing I do want to talk about is this is game week 1 bench boost. Hypothetically, I'm going to want to transform this after the bench boost. So obviously I want to take some of this value that's on the bench, put it into the 11. So what's like the ideal starting 11 / squad look like after the bench boost? Because I want to get that out of the way as soon as possible. But before we do that, I have to put out my real thoughts slash my roast for this team, because I think it's good. It's a good exercise to just evaluate your team on the whole. And being honest, I think it's a good team. I think it's very difficult to make a bad team, if that makes any sense. Like, I think pretty much, like, when I see drafts online, let's be real, there are some truly awful drafts. But for the most part, for the engaged managers, pretty much every draft somebody has sent me, I've been like, yeah, that's at a bare minimum fine, probably great, at least good, and it could be amazing, especially early on. But there's always a downside, and I want to be brutally honest with this team. So first off, I think overall this is an overly calculated, overly statsy team, and I'm not saying that just to play devil's advocate. I do think that is true, and that's not a compliment. So that's roast number one. Number two, I think going triple any team's defense is risky. We assume that Arsenal are going to be this great defensive team, but I think there's plenty of other people who would say that teams tend to have a slump after they win the title, and maybe they're not as effective and they lose like that 1% of sharpness that led them to make so many clean sheets. And then if we swap Mitchell back in or out for Konsa, I'm quadrupling up, and that's like absolutely idiotic. And then on top of that, I'm doubling up on Man City. So I'm like, basically I only have two teams represented in my defense. So if neither team gets a clean sheet, it's going to be an absolutely shit week for me. We all know that Gabriel is not as good when he doesn't have Saliba. So I could be over-indexing on how he performed last season with Saliba next to him. Calafiori, kind of similar story with the rest of the Arsenal defenders. David Raya, you're paying way too much for a goalkeeper. You're probably going to get roughly the same output from a 4.5 million goalkeeper. Gavardiol, I don't think there's really much beyond the clean sheets. He's not playing left back. It's not like that season where I think he was 6 million, or maybe I don't remember exactly, but it's not that season where he was playing as a true left back under Pep. He's going to be playing as a left center back almost certainly with Maresca, with O'Reilly as the left back. O'Reilly could be good, but minutes are a massive concern. And maybe I should have said that with Calafiori. Like, Hincapié is just waiting literally right there to take over any minutes. He's got injury concerns. That's a risk. O'Reilly, slightly different. I don't know if Aït-Nouri is like sitting there in the wings ready to play, but O'Reilly's coming back from a long World Cup. He didn't look entirely sharp in the Community Shield. And I think if it doesn't work out, maybe Aït-Nouri can be that guy that plays as like a left wing back, basically, in this like weird asymmetrical system. In the midfield, I've gone way too cheap. Bryan Mbeumo is probably going to be good, but missing a Semenyo, missing Gibbs White, I'm struggling a little bit because I don't think the midfielders are that great, but I see so many drafts that I am really going against the effective ownership on. I'm going to have to hope that the midfielders, especially the higher priced midfielders, don't do as well. So I'm putting a lot of faith in guys like Anton Stack, Ismail Assar, and Pascal Gross to really outperform some of the players that are higher priced than them and that have more avenues to points. And especially ones that are probably playing in better teams. I mean, Crystal Palace is probably going to be a lower to mid-table team. Leeds, maybe the same thing. Brighton, I think, are okay, but are probably going to be battling mid-table, or maybe like upper mid-table. They've got European fixtures to contend with, the Conference League, which they're already had to play like a qualifying match for. So there's a lot of downsides in the midfield. And Slater, we won't even say. I mean, he could be replaced ahead of Gameweek 1 and might not even play for bench boost. In the forward line, we've got the most expensive player in the game, probably the most captainable, but obviously in this team, I've gone against Bruno's effective ownership. So if Bruno crushes it and Holland just like kind of gets by, which if you watch the Community Shield, he was very ineffective, only played 50 minutes or so. was just like a shell of himself. If he can't snap back into form against Bournemouth, I mean, granted, Arsenal are a very good team, but City were worked. Calvert-Lewin to the left of him, injury concern, has had a great season last season, but can he maintain that? He's had a long career and he hasn't always had the highs that he did last season. So if we see another dip, that could come at a bad time. And then finally, João Pedro in the starting 11. It's a new manager, don't really know exactly how they're going to play. Did well in preseason. That has almost no bearing on how it's going to play out in the Premier League. We've seen that season on season where player just pops off in preseason. They go on to just absolutely be trash. And very important, very eye test. He's now going to be wearing the number 9 shirt, which if anybody knows, the Chelsea curse of the 9, which did it start with Torres or was he just another, I don't know, casualty of that? But yeah, the curse of the 9, João Pedro's taken over the 9 shirt. That's the analysis you were looking for. And then the guys on the bench, obviously I didn't go for Luke Shaw. I went for Mitchell, who is clearly worse in every way. Pascal Gross is 35. Is he going to be able to maintain the minutes? For Bruggen, like legitimately, I'm not even just saying this. I think he's the worst he's like one of the worst goalkeepers in the league. Definitely the most overrated goalkeepers in the league. And Slater, he plays for Hull, which are the worst team in the league. Okay, some of that was tongue-in-cheek, but I hope you get that you can levy criticism and slander at pretty much any player across the league. I'm choosing to go with this because I feel like the data support these players, and combined with the, brain dead thoughts in my head, I think this is a pretty good team to set up for Game Week 1. Okay, that was enough criticizing. I just want to do a quick zoom in on my face. I do think my team can be bad, but I also think it can be good. So let's take the team that I just slandered and kind of play out how I may expect them to form up just loosely, because I know that there's some players I'm going to want to downgrade. I'm not going to want Verbruggen 4.5 on my bench forever. Let's take a look at what a team would look like after a wild card, which I'm staying flexible on, but I think in between now and Game Week 5 or 6 is probably when I'm going to want to hit the wild card. And I don't know if there's data to back this up, but I tend to feel like an early wild card just sets up a better season. The seasons that I've done the best, I've tended to hit an early wild card. So it might just be confirmation bias, but I feel like after 5-6 weeks, you probably have it's kind of a good point where you know enough, but you're still able to take some risks on some players. Like last season, I took the risk on Mukiele and Roos, paid off in dividends. I got them when they were, 4.0, 4.5 respectively, or I guess flipped, whatever. But yeah, I went on them because I saw that Sunderland were playing so well at home and were defying expectations. I anticipated that to continue. It did. If we can get enough data in this first 4, 5, 6 weeks, I think optimally that's when I'm going to want a wild card. I'm not going to want to hold it on to it forever, especially if I'm getting the bench boost out of the way early. Okay, so in this hypothetical world where I've played my bench boost early and now we're into Game Week 2, let's just say I hit the wild card Game Week 2 for Bruggen, and this is just to get the players into the template, to get the players onto the board and get some of the players on the bench off for somebody cheaper. So for Bruggen, let's just put in Dubravka. I would never pick him as a 4.0 goalkeeper, but just for points of demonstration of I would go down to a 4.0 goalkeeper. Preferably I'd go down to a goalkeeper that might have dropped in price. So that might actually be Dubravka, honestly, because he's pretty highly owned and he's almost certainly not going to play. Pascal Gross, I think, so he's 5.5 million. I'm only going to bring him down to somebody who's 5 million because I think by the time that I wildcard, there will be some sort of viable 5 million option. Let's sort by price and load more. Let's put in Gomez just for the example. If this can load, please. Let's just type him in. It's not going to load. I don't know. Something's up. Okay, Gomez, he's 5 million. And then Mitchell, honestly, I'd probably keep a 4.5 million defender just because if I do get injuries or something like that. So I've got 1 million in the bank to put somewhere in this team. And I think the defense is set. This is about as stacked of a defense as I could ever possibly imagine. Midfield could use some work, and the forward line I'm actually very comfortable with. So if I had 1 million burning a hole in my pocket, I could bring Sar up to 7.5. I could bring Stack up to a 7.0. I could bring Mbumo up to Semenyo, but then I'd have to drop one of these guys. So you kind of see the dilemma I'm kind of in. This is why I really like Stack and Sar, is because I don't feel like it's a massive improvement on to bring in somebody like Szoboszlai or Florian Wirtz or Morgan Rogers. Although maybe Morgan Rogers is the play. Maybe I go from Sar to... It's really going to make me do this. Rogers. 7.5. Prices will have fluctuated by then, so maybe it's not possible, but maybe something like that is the play. And then I would feel relatively good about the bench. Hopefully this Gomez player is actually like a DEFCON 5.0 midfielder. Mitchell, I think, is totally fine for 4.5. And then Slater, 4.5. If he gets the minutes, great. If not, he's almost never going to play. I'm almost planning to never use the third choice midfielder because I want to keep as much value in the starting 11 long term once I have a better idea of how the teams are playing, and then on a micro level, like how individual players are playing. And I also think this is kind of conservative because almost certainly we're going to find a cheaper defender who's going to be performing like crazy. So like a Konsa, for instance, if he does end up going to Arsenal and he's like performing kind of on similar levels, we're not seeing that fire from Calafiori. Calafiori's rotating with Hincapié. Going down from Calafiori to a Konsa will add another million. Maybe Gavardiol isn't the guy, so we bring him down to like a Dan Ballard. And then soon enough, you've got enough from Mbumo to Semenyo, and that's looking pretty good. Because honestly, in the mid-priced or the higher to mid-priced midfielders, really the only ones that stand out are Semenyo and Gibbs White for me. And then a wait and see on Rogers, a wait and see on Saka, a wait and see on Palmer. If they end up doing really well, maybe this shifts and we take a little bit of value out of the defense. But that's why some of those players I identified as like wait and see, I would rather have the stacked defense, which I feel a little bit more confident in their value, and like going down to the cheaper defenders who present good value that was kind of unclocked by the data, than the other way around. I don't think we're going to see a lot of like really good, cheap midfielders just come out of nowhere to start the season. Not to the same degree as the defenders, but that's kind of my general thought. And hopefully I've done a decent job of like mapping out kind of loosely where my thoughts are, because this is very fluid. I know I kind of want to bench boost game week 1, but even that's not certain. I kind of want a wild card between game weeks 2 and 6 ideally, but by the time we get to game week 6, I probably will have played it, let's be honest, because all of the best laid plans, there's a phrase along with that and it's not coming to my mind, but basically to say that all these plans that I made, all the data supporting it, it all goes out the window as soon as game week 1 kicks on. Now I'm going to wrap this up by taking a look on Discord, which you are free to join. I have a channel that is dedicated to questions for the pod. So if you want your questions answered on the pod, join the Discord, drop them there. You could also hit me up in the comments or send me a message on Reddit, whatever, and just let me know, can you answer this on the pod? And I'd be happy to do so. And I thought this guy presented a lot of great, deep questions that I probably have kind of just skated over, but I think it's good. So question number 1, starting XI versus bench. Do high ranking managers actually invest more in their bench? How many dead spots are optimal? I think some of this is going to come down to, well, first of all, it's going to change from season to season because sometimes the pricing structure is so broken. Like last season, you could have a full playing bench that you didn't need any dead spots. You could afford every one of the best, most highest performing players that were scoring the most points on average. You could have afforded that team very, very easily. And like spread out across the bench as well. So last season, you didn't really need any dead spots. This season, we probably won't know until, I don't know, maybe like game week 6 to 10. Then we might have a better idea if we're actually going to need dead spots. Like if Palmer, Saka, potentially Bradley Barcola, if he comes to Liverpool, if those types of players start performing to a similar level as like a Bruno and a Haaland, we're going to actually have some decisions to make. As it currently stands, I think you could make a really, really good team without any dead spots, or maybe at most one dead spot with like a Slater. And I think that could be very optimal because it does allow you the freedom to rotate players, get better fixtures, especially if you're saving a little bit on defense. You can kind of rotate around bad defensive fixtures. So yeah, it's maybe a non-answer, but we're going to have to wait and see a little bit, but it does vary from season to season. I think this season, it's going to be very easy to field a full team and a bench with maybe one dead spot to make an optimal team. Question number 2, auto subs. How many auto subs happen on average per season? How does this vary by rank and time of the season, especially during early season uncertainty, fixture congestion / Christmas, European football, double game weeks, blank game weeks, end of season rotation? So there's a lot that actually goes into this one. So for one, I think it's going to depend a little bit on the risk tolerance of the players that you actually have in your team. If I had a team full of Reece Jameses and Sakas and even Palmer to an extent, because he burned me last season a couple times, if you have players that are prone to some level of injury, you could be getting auto subs pretty regularly. And likewise, if you go for like a Calafiori or a Hincapié, they could rotate, and especially with defenders, they tend to play like 90 minutes. Managers tend to use their subs for the more attacking players. So if you went with a Calafiori and it turns out Hincapié starts game week 1, you might get an auto sub. The caveat to all of this, I think, depends on, like, let's take that same Calafiori Hincapié situation. If Hincapié gets injured, then Calafiori, you're feeling very good that he's not going to get auto subbed. So I think on average, if you have like a team such as mine, which probably has O'Reilly and Calafiori as maybe the higher of the rotation risks in there, then I'm probably gonna get an auto sub maybe a couple times in the first few game weeks, just because of that early season uncertainty. I think people would like to assume that their players are nailed a lot more than they actually are. And Mbumo, for instance, like, I don't think people were expecting him not to play that final preseason game. He didn't. So things can happen, and I think it's good to have at least some level of a bench, but don't go too crazy. I think maybe I overemphasized that one point of like having a decent bench. I think at the beginning of the season, you might want to have some money on the bench, but not like go crazy about it. And then down the line, if we're seeing that actually Palmer, Saka, and Barcola just aren't performing to the level, and the premiums are, maybe even Bruno Fernandes is underperforming. Maybe he gets a season-long injury, or maybe Haaland gets a season-long injury. And like, then we can literally just afford all of the highest scoring players in the game. Then all of that goes out the window. You just bring in the best players. You got a strong bench that plays consistently and gets high scoring points too. So yeah, it's another one where we're going to have to kind of wait and see, but use your best judgment and balance as much as possible. I think the lineup that I came out with originally, where I've got Pascal Gross on the bench, or like a 5.5 midfielder, a 4.5 defender, and a 4.5 midfielder like Slater, or pick your poison on any other like kind of one dud player. I think that's conservative enough, but also balanced enough. And then, yeah, throughout the season, it's going to fluctuate and change, and really just focusing on that early season is probably the first step. And then you'll get a handle on it moving into, double game weeks, Christmas and all that. But those do tend, the time points that you pointed out do tend to be the peaks of peak FPL, nailed player, somehow suddenly not nailed. Okay, and for the next part of the question, let me jump to this screen. Oh, actually, I'm going to jump over here. So the next question is as follows. Likewise, how many extra expected points does each additional 0.5 million invested in the XI buy? That's a very difficult question, because even if you look at this example, like Anderson, 6.5 million, and maybe that's not a great example. Let's go with Dewsbury Hall. A little bit more consistent. He's staying at the same team, so maybe we can anticipate his points to be roughly the same. Dewsbury Hall, or Stack for that matter, 6.5 million and 6 respectively. They scored more points on average than Palmer, who is 3 and 3.5 million more than those players. Or Szoboszlai, even 0.5 and 1 million more. Rogers, same thing. Like, because certain players are, undervalued or overvalued, you can't really take it consistently to mean that if I put more money into it, it's going to score me more points. That's kind of why I did make a point of, like, if you have an extra 0.5 million or even 1 million, and you don't feel like there's a viable upgrade, like I've kind of been in the situation where I have SAR and I have 0.5 million in the bank. Do I really need to go up to Szoboszlai, who I think like on average is probably going to score roughly the same, unless he gets penalties, and that maybe that kind of changes. But do I think it's worth it to put that extra money in there? Not necessarily. I view them similarly valued, and I see them as similar performers. Maybe it's more useful to save that 0.5 million and then allocate that in other ways, but that's why it's difficult. You can't exactly take, and this was something I think I had to learn over seasons of playing, that just because you're putting more money into it doesn't mean you're going to get more out of it. One crystal clear example comes to mind. There was a time when oh my God, it was Man City, and I can't remember what exactly had happened, but Gundogan was playing as like a false 9. He was like 6 or maybe 6.5 million. And then Foden, I think, was 9 million, or honestly, maybe it was even like Kevin De Bruyne was like the option. And I went the more expensive route. And then Gundogan playing as a false 9 just like absolutely obliterated my rank. So I put more money into that asset that I was thinking, this guy has more data backing him up. He's got the historical support for him. This is going to be a better play to use that money into that player. But then the cheaper option, who is just playing as like a false 9, just completely threw that out the window. So hopefully that answered your questions. If I didn't do as good a job, you can definitely hit me back up on Discord, and I'll try to back that up with a little bit more explanation. But yeah, and if anybody else wants their questions answered, hit me up on Discord or Reddit or any other way that you find possible. Send me a snail mail. Actually, please don't find my address. And that's going to do it for this episode. And just a reminder, I am recording this Wednesday night. If things evolve from now until the deadline, or when this episode comes out, I will try to keep everybody as up to date as possible on the Discord and Substack. All of those links are in the description. And just as a refresher, this is what my draft is looking like. David Raya, Gabriel, Calafiore, Gavardiol, Nico O'Reilly, Mbumo, Stack, Sar, Calvert-Lewin, Holland, Jal Pedro, and on the bench, Verbruggen, Gross, Mitchell, Slater. Currently, Mitchell is Konsa, but assuming Konsa's not going to play game week 1, it's probably going to be Mitchell. But I will keep everybody up to date as possible on Discord and Substack. Hopefully nothing changes. Hopefully Konsa is like, Arteta's like, this guy is going to play game week 1. There's a bunch of leaks that confirm it, because I would love to have 4 Arsenal players on a bench, 4 Arsenal defenders on a bench boost, and just like pucker up and hope it all goes to plan. So how is your game week 1 draft looking? A call to action of sorts. So let me know, drop it in the description or drop it into the comments. I'll be happy to give you some comments. But like I said, it's kind of difficult to make a bad draft. So I'm going to do my best to be critical, but everyone's got a pretty good draft, and hopefully you're feeling as confident as I am not, the opposite of me. So yeah. I've done enough rambling. I'm talking complete nonsense at this point. Good luck with game week 1, and I'll see you after for more analysis.